Well, good Wednesday evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bowling with the FEF, a platform for you to share your unique bowling story live on our YouTube channel. It is definitely an exciting night tonight, not only because of the fantastic guests that we've got for you, but also what's to come, and I'll get into that as we go here. But I want to start out with an announcement that USBC made recently, and that is that Mookie Betts, the bowler more well known for his baseball day job than his accomplishments on the lanes, although there are many, was awarded an exemption to compete in the main field of the U.S. Open. That's something that really got the strong opinions going on social media this week. Some saying he should have to bowl in the PTQ, the pre-tournament qualifier. Others saying he should get in the main field for the publicity. Still others believe he should have given up the spot. Lots of opinions. You know what they say about opinions. But here's mine. I think Mookie should play for the Brewers, and I'll tell you why. Because the Brewers are the best team in Major League Baseball, and you know, a long season comes with some sprains and strains. If there's a minor league rehab assignment, guess where he goes? He goes to Nashville, which is where our guest is from. So I'm sure he wouldn't have a problem seeing him at that level. But anyway, the U.S. Open starts on January 29th on TV. You'll find it on FS1 on the 4th at 4 p.m. That's that match play component that's new to the majors and on television this year. And then on February 5th, Big Fox, 2 p.m. For the U.S. Open. Can't wait to see that. And really the return of the PBA Tour for 2023. Well, if you follow the channel, you are familiar at this point with the Chippewa Valley Match Games, one of the biggest scratch events in my area in western Wisconsin. And congratulations to Paul Bober. He was the champion of this year's Chippewa Valley Match Games. It happened in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, about a week and a half ago. And Paul qualified fifth. And there's our guest. I'm going to pull him away for a second. Paul qualified fifth and went on to really have 10 great games of match play before he gets to the finals. Ends up defeating Eric Schott for the championship, 215 to 175. It's his first Chippewa Valley Match Games title, although he has bowled the event several times in the past. Here's what he had to say after.
My ball speed's not very high. My rev rate's not super high. I'm going to tend to be a bit more competitive when they're tougher and the scoring pace is a little lower than when you got to shoot 240s and 250s to compete.
Sure.
So it was seeing I bowled B squad yesterday and seeing the scoring pace from A squad. It's like, oh, okay, we're not bowling on last year's pattern.
Yep.
You know, that's great. And if I can figure out a way to get the ball to get to the pocket consistently, it's usually going to be the correct way to also strike and carry.
So congratulations to Paul, our champion from the Chippewa Valley Match Games. I keep popping Jim up there. We'll get to Jim in a second. He won $1,500 for taking home that title. 85 total entries, including a few who bowled back. There were 2 qualifying squads on Saturday. Minus 51 for 8 games was the cut. They were bowling on 2019 U.S. Open number 2, so it did play pretty tough for those guys. They made Sunday's match play, and you can see the stepladder finals on replay anytime. Just look down the channel for that stream of the stepladder finals of the 2023 Chippewa Valley match games. Well, we do have some live streaming bowling action coming up later this week as well. January is always a big month on the channel on that front. The Peacock Classic, which is an NCAA women's college tournament, is coming up this Friday through Sunday at Cadillac XBC in Waterloo, Iowa. And you'll see live streamed action all 3 days here on the Bowling with the Fef YouTube channel. The teams that are participating in this year's event are a little bit different than last year, although there are some returning programs. You've got Valparaiso, the defending champion, along with Newman, Lewis, the host school, Upper Iowa, Augustana, Carroll, Illinois Wesleyan, Elmhurst, and Quincy. And then the links, again, you can find them on the channel. They're up right now, or they're somewhat easy to remember, I think anyway, bit.ly/2023 Peacock, and then your day of choice, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Those links are case sensitive. The competition starts at 9:30 bright and early on Friday morning, and of course continues Saturday and Sunday here on the channel. So best of luck to all those schools participating in the Peacock Classic. And with the weather we have coming our way in the Midwest here, best of luck and safe travels to those teams too, because it might be a little dicey getting there, depending on where you're coming from. Bowling with the Fef is brought to you by Chip Magnet Salsa. Chip Magnet is a family business right near me in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. It distributes salsa, relish, and a lot more to stores in 38 states and Canada. And one of those states is Tennessee, where you can find Chip Magnet at Food City or Turnip Truck stores if you're in the Nashville area. If you're not, or just like to shop online, go to chipmagnetsalsa.com to get your fix. Chip Magnet, raise your snack standards. And as always, a big thank you to Chip Magnet for supporting the show as they have for more than a year now. And I appreciate it each and every day. Well, our guest tonight recently shot 300 in an association tournament, which on the surface doesn't seem that huge. It happens in a lot of association tournaments, right? But if you're not familiar with this gentleman, wait till you see the way he did it and the way he bowls, period. It is entertaining. It's amazing. And it's all his, really. And let's bring him out here. He... Wow, Jim Cripps, the backwards bowler, is on our show tonight, live from the Nashville area of Tennessee. Jim, it has been a pleasure meeting you. Welcome to Bowling with the Fef.
Thanks so much for having me. Great show, and excited to be on.
Thank you. So I want to get back to start to that deal with Mookie Betts and Jimmy Allen. These are guys who are from your neck of the woods. And I'm sure you've heard the buzz so far on social. Have you met these guys, and do you have any kind of opinion on what's going on with this?
Well, honestly, I get why some people are upset, but at the same time, it's good for the sport. Yep. And so that's kind of the lens that I use as often as possible is it good exposure for the sport? And I think in this case, it absolutely is. Mookie and Jimmy both are here in Middle Tennessee. In fact, Bob Learn, one of the most amazing bowlers on the planet, and probably my favorite person to bowl with as well. Jimmy bowls on his team, I believe, in league, and so it's comical that you got this pocket of people that have such stature in bowling and just kind of in the world as a celebrity, and they're right here in Middle Tennessee. So I think it's great for bowling.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly is. I've also seen some folks say, the people who are complaining mostly probably aren't going to throw a ball at the U.S. Open. So, I mean, you got that perspective too. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is the fact that USBC has said that they will make a decision on certification of string pins this year. I noticed on Facebook that you commented you've recently tried out string pins for the first time. I have not, so I'm very interested to hear your review on the whole experience.
Well, you know, I'm still mixed on the review. You know, as a bowler, and you know what I consider myself a serious bowler, I struggle with the idea of a string pin. And you know, just this past week was doing a photo shoot actually for Bowlers Journal. So gonna have an article coming out there soon. And it was shot at this center that you can see behind me. It's a beautiful center. It's called East Side Bowl, and it's not where I normally bowl. In fact, this is a string pin center. But the owner, oh my gosh, they went to such lengths to make sure that it's a beautiful facility, that it is different than anything they've ever experienced. And he was passionate, although not a bowler before, was really passionate about how well the center is maintained and those types of things. Now, they're not a league house. You know, it is entertainment bowling, but a great experience, great first experience. Again, for competitive bowling, I don't know. I'm probably going to lean a bit more traditional in that regard and say I'm not looking forward to string pins. But in talking to the manager there, he's like, we don't have a mechanic. Our overhead is much more in line with where we need to be because we don't have a mechanic. He goes, now things do go wrong. He goes, but it's not something that I or somebody else here on staff can't resolve versus having to have someone that is trained in, you know, putting pin setters back together and that type of thing. So, you know, for the advancement of our sport and, you know, getting more people introduced to our sport, I think it's probably a really good thing. Should it be for competition and for leagues? I think it's still yet to be decided.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. And it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. I mean, that's gonna, you know, probably result in some more back and forth on social
Yeah,
and stuff like that. Usually does, but hey, what are you gonna do? This is America, right?
right.
Um,
Absolutely.
the main purpose of the show, obviously, is to get into your bowling story and kind of go from the start and get us to the present. So,
Sure.
I want to start with, you know, with kind of before, you know, this big, you know, I'll say explosion into backwards bowling. Did you come from a family of bowlers or have any bowling in, you know, in your friend group or anything like that?
I didn't. So when I was a kid, and I mean, say 4 years old or so, my parents bowled one or maybe two seasons of a league, but I was so young. And if you remember way back then, you know, bowling centers kind of had childcare in that, you know, one or two people were staffing the room where all the kids played, and you know, the parents could bowl league. And of course, they'd never get away with that these days. Far too many restrictions, some good, some bad, I'm sure. But, you know, back in the late 70s, early 80s, that was kind of the norm. And so, what I remember about that time is really kind of three things. One, I got to roll one ball after league was over. So, I would roll one ball. I got a milkshake after league was over. And so, that's what I was working toward. And for some reason, I'm real still not sure exactly why, but the guys on Dad's league, their whole goal was for them to be able to do the longest headstand after having bowled. And I really still to this day, I've never asked the question as to what was going on there, but it probably had some male ego and some adult beverages involved. Probably very similar to how I started bowling backwards.
Yeah, and I mean, we got to fast forward for that because you didn't really keep it up as a kid, did you? You kind of left it and came back a while later.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up bowling at all, and I'm 21, 22 years old. The Pinnacle Family Entertainment Center in Clarksville, Tennessee had just opened, and I went out with some friends. They were bowlers, I was not. And at this point they're getting to the point where they're taking it serious. They're in a league and those types of things. And I'm out bowling with them. We're having a good time on the lanes, but I am just atrocious. I'm not a bowler at all. And they were giving me a hard time about how bad of a bowler I was. And then just a couple lanes down, I had some customers. So I ran a wireless store there in town. And some of my customers just happened to be on the next two lanes. And so now they're giving me a hard time. And so now I've got, three or four lanes of people giving me a hard time as to how bad I am. And, being a young 20 something, you've got a little bit of ego going on, and nobody wants to be razzed that hard about something. And so as a joke, I rolled a ball behind me, and sheer luck, but the first ball was a strike. And I turned around to my friends, and they were instantly angry. Like, they went from ha ha ha, you're terrible, to aggravated. And of course I didn't understand this. What's wrong? Well, you can't really do that. And they got real serious. And so before we left that night, there was a bet for any ball in the pro shop for a 150 game. So it took me about 6 weeks. I shot 163, and by then I was better backward than I was forward. And so there was really no motivation to turn around. And so I started bowling league that way, and then came in second on the handicap side of the state tournament the following year, and then went to Vegas and bowled for a Cadillac. And that was my first taste at choking. And what I mean by that is I practiced pretty hard for this Cadillac challenge. And so it was me against the other 49 winners across the United States of this side pot for the state tournaments. And in order to advance, it came down to the last frame, and I had to pick off a 10 pin out of a full rack and then go back through the same hole.
Oh, wow.
And because they gave you a number, you had to bowl exactly that number without going over and without having gutter balls.
Okay.
And so I accomplished that, and we get down to the last ball of the last game, and all I had to do was get a 5, 6, or 7 to win the Cadillac.
Mm-hmm.
And I choked.
Oh.
I threw my spare ball. It stuck on my thumb. It went straight down the middle of the lane and struck. It was like all the pins parted. And, so I'm very frustrated with myself and aggravated, all those things, after having been, you're on that stage, everybody's watching, and that's what you do.
Yeah.
But they came up, they invited me to bowl at Expo the next day, and I got to bowl with Chris Barnes and some others. And that's really kind of how all of this started.
Yeah. When, as we got closer to our show date, I messaged Matt Cannizzaro. He's done a bunch with USBC in his former career there, and he's certainly helped me out. And I knew that, that you guys had a friendship. And, one of the things that he said was that he thought it was too bad that you kind of got started. Your first few years in the spotlight were before we start getting a lot of video and social media. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the word spreads more quickly had that not been the case, had we had things like YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff. But tell me about how word of mouth started traveling about what you were doing until you get to the point where you're bowling for Cadillacs and things like that.
Well, it really was kind of quiet, and I tried to keep it that way because I didn't know how to bowl, much less how to bowl backwards. There was nobody to emulate. There was nobody out there on, YouTube wasn't even a thing. We're talking about 2003 is when I was bowling for the Cadillac. 2001 was when I started bowling. And so, you're trying to learn a new sport. You don't do it the way everybody else does it. So it was a lot of trial and error. And one of the things that I really struggled with is I kept coming out on the side of the ball, and so my rotation was, it kind of worthless. And, even the first year I actually released the ball with my hand still underneath it and kind of flipping it backwards. So it was actually rolling against the lane. And so you weren't going to pick up any speed that way.
Sure.
And, it probably took 4 or 5 years to kind of figure out, one, that I needed an extra finger hole in order to stay behind the ball. 2, that I needed to turn my hand over in the middle of the swing. So, if you watch my videos, I push the ball up and then I turn my hand over and get on top of the ball. That way I can push
talking.
through.
I'm going to pull one up while you're
yeah, absolutely. That last 2 frames of the 300 game or something, that one's pretty easy to see, but that's where I get my rotation from. Yeah. So this is a good one. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll push the ball up, and then I've got my hand on top of the ball. And so it helps my release, speeds my ball up, I'm throwing, typically I'm going to be about 15 to 15 and a half miles an hour for most shots. Now, if you get somewhere where you got to slow it down a little bit or speed it up a little bit, I've got about 1.5 miles an hour in range, but my sweet spot's 15 to 15 and a half.
Okay. Yeah. And tell me, we see you taking really 3 big steps backwards and letting go.
Right.
Is the footwork part of the mechanics? Is that something that has stayed pretty similar throughout your career, or has that stuff evolved as you've become better?
It's evolved. In fact, it was a train wreck originally. Originally, I slid backwards on both toes. So, it was before I figured out, what type of shoe that I needed, or if I was going to plant at the end of the approach. And so just using inexpensive beginner shoes, of course, those beginner shoes come slick on both sides.
Yeah.
And in my release, I probably had more of a 4-step approach and, kind of slid to a stop on both toes, which did not provide the stability I needed in order to really be competitive. And the 4-step approach didn't really work either. One of the things when somebody tries to do this, because I've had experienced bowlers give this a try. So an example would be, I was at Lucky Strike in Hollywood, and I was practicing. I was going to be on the Jimmy Kimmel show back in 2005. And the guy that ran the center there had a lot of experience in bowling and actually had done some of the ball work and that type of thing for some bowling movies. And he was a couple lanes down, and he goes, "I'm going to give it a try." And, very few people had really given it a try to that point, much less serious bowlers giving it a try. And because I stop on the wrong foot, you got to keep that knee out of the way. And he hit himself in the top of the knee in the swing, because he went for it. I mean, he tried to throw it the way that I throw it.
So like
right
on the way down.
Yeah, and he caught that knee, and he hit the ground. It just laid him out.
Yeah.
And I felt so bad for him. I run over to check on him, and of course he didn't want my help, because he goes, "I'm going to leave that to you," and hobbled off. But there's been several that have tried it and been successful at it. In fact, one of the Titans players, Michael Griffin, he held a celebrity tournament a few years ago, back in 2014, and he gave it a try. And on his second ball, he got pins. And we're talking about that's not a guy that's not really a bowler. He's just out there, lending his name and celebrity status to raise some money for a great cause. And he was like, "I got to give this a try, Jim." And it probably exacerbated it, because I actually won that tournament. And so I had a great chat with him and all that. And he goes, "I'm going to give this thing a try." And so I did give him a couple pointers, but on the second ball, he got pins. And then both Bob Learn and Brian Voss have tried it, and they both got pins in the first ball. So, I truly believe people that are great, world-class bowlers, if you ask them to do something with a bowling ball, they're going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
No matter what it is.
For sure. Yeah. One of our regular viewers, Jay Santos, watching us live. Hey, Jay, glad to see you on. He says, "Yikes, that is hilarious." I'm guessing meaning, trying and not succeeding with a bowling ball to the knee. That's never fun for really anybody anywhere. But
Right.
In some of your past interviews on podcasts and the like, you've talked about getting kicked out of a center simply for bowling the way you do. That's got to be kind of discouraging when you're trying to do something that isn't traditional, that isn't the way that everybody else does or that coaches teach you to do it.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I attribute my success really to just staying positive. And that's really in anything. So I used to lead a big company here in Nashville and had roughly 500 team members. And that's the message that I gave to them every day possible, is there's a lot of things in this world that you can allow to take you negative, and your ability to overcome that, your ability to stay positive, is more often than not going to attribute to your wins. And early on. So back up to 2003. So, I choked in that Cadillac tournament on the very last ball. And I had decided I was going to win that tournament. In fact, I told people I was going to win that tournament. And it comes down to the last ball and I choked.
Yeah.
And they invited me to bowl at Expo the next day. And I won't name the bowler, but I'm there to bowl with a couple Hall of Fame bowlers. And one of them, as soon as I threw my first ball, now keep in mind, I am 2 years into bowling. I'm on this stage that doesn't even seem realistic that I'm even in this world.
Yeah.
I'm at Expo for the first time ever. I'm overwhelmed. I walk up, I muster the courage to throw my first ball. And this Hall of Famer picks up his stuff, looks at me and goes, "Not with me, you don't." Chucked it in his bag and walked out.
Oh.
And I am mortified.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to hold it together. And Chris Barnes, I know Chris has had, he had a reputation back then of being a little bit of a bad boy, whatever. And, he looked at me at my eye and he goes, "Jim," "we came here to have fun. Grab that rock. Let's have some fun." And, I've tried to kind of keep true to that ever since. Is, Chris didn't owe me anything. He could have absolutely just been like, whatever, and kept doing his thing. But no, he took a couple seconds to invest in my mental state and brought me back. And so I look at it like that's my job. My job is to continue to do that for others. And so, years ago I got kicked out of a bowling center here in my hometown. And it was in the fifth frame. I had this was back when I was averaging 140 something. And I had a 90 in the fifth frame. So I'm headed towards a pretty decent game. And they shut my lane off and told me to leave.
Wow.
And so I'm packing my stuff up. I'm headed out. And, the kind of full circle to that story is word got out that happened. And about 6 months later, the city tournament was going to be held at two houses. So at my home center and then at this other center where I'd been kicked out. In fact, I was not allowed to bowl in their center.
Jeez.
And Doug Hayes, who's, I got to say, a local legend. He was on tour for a while, just a fantastic bowler here in our local area that's involved in all things bowling and, helping up and comers and kind of all things. And he goes, "Jim, you bowl in the city tournament?" And I said, "No, Doug, I'm not allowed to bowl in that other center." And he goes, "Well, you're going to bowl it with me." I said, "Doug, I'm not trying to start anything. It's their center. They're allowed to do what they want to." And he goes, "No, Jim, this is bigger than that. You're an association member. This is an association tournament. And you're going to bowl in that tournament with me, or they're going to tell us both we're not allowed to, and we're going to move the tournament." And the local association stood behind it. And so sure enough, owners came out, "You're not bowling here." And they went and had a little powwow and said, "Either Jim's bowling or we're moving the tournament." And for them to back me up like that, I didn't see how I deserved it. I mean, even to date, I don't see how I deserved that, but just amazing people in bowling. That's all I can say is just, I have been so fortunate that throughout these 20 plus years, the amazing talent and amazing attitudes and personalities that I've met in bowling just make it all worthwhile.
Yeah. And now, sitting here talking to you, obviously you're passionate about the sport, and I don't blame you because I'm the same way. But was that the moment where, bowling becomes from just something fun to do to, oh my gosh, it is my life, and this is something that I'm going to pour everything into? Is that the transition part, or was there another time where you could feel that change kind of happening?
Yeah, there was a couple of times that came out. I had an exceptional game in the state tournament, and I think it was 2002 or 2003. I guess it would have been 2003. And I came in second in handicap. Of course, I came into it with a low average, but I just bowled exceptionally well. And what I learned about myself in that moment, because, we're in this center in Memphis, Tennessee, and the crowd starts to gather. And, prior to this, I'd really kind of practiced in the dark. And what I mean by that is Randy Huth, which you may have heard that name before. So Randy Huth is the Little League coach from here in Nashville that has taken his team, the Little League World Series, back to back the last 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And he ran the local center at the time. And he knew that I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to bowl backwards. I was, and I didn't want to be around other people, whether they're making fun or that type of stuff. So he used to send me a text or give me a call when they were about to quit putting lanes out. So they're about to shut the lanes off, but the bar was going to be open for another hour or so. And so he would give me a call, and I just lived a few minutes from there. And so I would come down and reserve one of the last lanes, and I would really kind of bowl by myself for a great part of that. And so it's just amazing people that have kind of backed me up throughout this whole time. There wouldn't be a backwards bowler without Randy Huth or without Doug Hayes or, so many throughout that 20 plus years of history. But it was probably during that tournament, because I went from trying to kind of hide as I bowled so I didn't draw attention to the crowd got bigger and bigger, and they were standing between the lockers and everybody's trying to see. And I think I shot 222. It was my highest game ever. And I did it with this huge crowd watching. And that's really kind of when I figured out that I loved pressure. And the more people watching, the bigger the crowd, the higher the stakes, the better I was going to perform. And so it really combined my ultra competitiveness with the pressure of kind of being on stage that kind of brought out what I love about doing this. And, knock on wood, and I'm sure we'll talk about this here in a bit, but, one of the things that Matt really, kind of where we became friends is he called one day and wanted me to come out for a trick shot show. And I didn't even consider what I did a trick shot. And, now he wants me to do this in front of an audience. And, fast forward, knock on wood, even though there's one that's a little bit of a gray area, I've never missed a shot live. And it all kind of goes back to that high performance under pressure and whether or not you're prepared and if you're ready to do what you need to do. And that's really my space. That's what I love.
Yeah. Most of us, myself included, it's the opposite. We kind of, we kind of fear that kind of thing. Max Scribaro, who is one of our local bowlers, a previous guest on the show, asks if they kicked you out or let you bowl. More on that, please. I'm guessing this could be one of the two times, but it sounds like they just kicked you out. They said, don't let the door hit you, right?
Yeah, they turned the lane off. And, it happened again about 6 or 8 weeks later in a totally different center. And again, one of the reasons why I try to stay positive throughout all things is I look at everything as if it's just this one instance, and something good is going to come out of it from either me maintaining my attitude or fill in the blank of just how the world and karma works. But for any of you that know Larry Smitto, Larry used to own the Sounds, and he's the one that started Sounds baseball here in Middle Tennessee, and now he owns bowling centers. So I think he's got somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 bowling centers. And I was in one of his centers, and it just so happened it wasn't the one or he wasn't there that day, and they kicked me out. And the lady came over and said, "We don't allow that type of stuff in here. You're out of here." And I said, what am I doing wrong? And she goes, "You know exactly what you're doing wrong. Get out of here." So I left. Well, the next week I was bowling league at one of his other centers, and he made it a point to come out there. And he said, "Jim, I heard about what happened, and I'm going to make it up to you." And I said, "Larry, there's no need to make it up to me. We're all good." And he goes, No, I'm going to make it up to you." So I come in for league the next week, and the local sportscaster, Rudy Kalis, who's just a legend in this area, is on the lanes waiting for me. And he goes, "I told you I was going to make it up to you. Rudy's going to do a great show about you and what you do."
Wow.
And again, it was just one of these moments where you're like, how do I deserve that?
Yeah.
How did that come to be? But I take it back to I truly believe we make our own fortune if we can control our attitude and how we react to the things that happen in or around us. So,
Max went on to say the tournament. Did they move the tournament? No, he bowled with you, right? And
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
went on.
so the association stood behind him and myself as well, and the proprietor was not happy about it, and I don't think she watched the rest of the tournament, but we bowled in that tournament, and I ended up bowling league in that house a year or two later, and it's kind of water under the bridge.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about kind of having reaction to doing this the way you do.
Hmm.
We hear guys like Belmo, like Kyle Troop, like Anthony Simonson say, they were trying to do this, they were discouraged, people got mad at them, but let's
Hmm.
face it, there's an army of two-handed bowlers right now, and
Yeah.
it's catching fire in the youth bowling community. There's numbers there to back up what they're doing. You didn't have that. So tell me about maybe the best thing somebody said to you about your bowling and the
Hmm.
worst.
There's probably several there. The worst, some people called me a mockery to the sport. That even as recent as in the last 60 days, somebody commented, continued to comment on my 300 game that I am bad for the sport and I should stop.
Hmm.
Now, on the flip side of that, I won't name names, but there's some very prominent people in bowling that have called me a great advocate for the sport. And the first time somebody did that, I kind of latched onto that and I said, I am not going to do anything that jeopardizes that phrase right there.
Yeah.
That's going to be kind of my true north. And so that's another reason why I don't get wild and crazy. If somebody says something negative, for the most part, I kill them with kindness. Most of the people that when I shot the 300, that video got about 500,000 views in the first 10 days. On Facebook, around 400,000. On my Facebook or on my YouTube channel, around 200,000. It was, I think, the third most shared video on Hammer's site for the year. And, so there's a lot of comments. And so that was actually during the Cadillac Challenge. That is probably the oldest picture of me bowling.
Wow.
That's in decent resolution. So
Okay.
that was at the Orleans back in 2003.
Yeah.
But in the midst of all those comments, I tried to respond to every single comment, and we're talking about thousands of comments.
Yeah.
And if it was congrats or whatever, I said thank you. And if it was negative, I tried to say I'm sorry you feel that way or whatever. But for the most part, I'll stay positive. There was a couple that just kept on and kept on. Somebody gets really nasty. Well, I'm going to put them in their place in as respectful a way as possible and just kind of move on.
Yeah.
But, I think that's just how you have to be just in general. No matter what you do, if you are doing big things, you're going to draw some haters. And you should actually appreciate those because they don't get mad at people that are flying under the radar. They get mad at people that are disrupting something.
Yeah.
And so me shooting 300 was disruptive, and it was disruptive for me in a good way.
Yeah.
I think from really back to 2003. So me choking in that instance, I really think is what led to some success doing the trick shot shows. And, I don't think I let go of that moment until that 300 game. And the reason I say that is the 300 game for me was much bigger. And the reason I say that is, in the clip that's on Facebook, it's from Travis Reed. He's sitting a little bit further back, and it gets me giving my son a fist bump between the 11th and 12th ball. And my son was not interested in bowling until that moment. And he just happened to go with me to the tournament that day and was there. And between the 8th and 9th frame, I was trying to figure out how I was going to get my son, who was playing with a friend of his, over to the lanes. And things just kind of fell into place. So he comes over to ask if he can go to the arcade. And I said, you absolutely can after I throw these next 4 balls. And so he sits down and, he's watching and he wants to give me a fist bump. And I come over and I give him a fist bump between each of the frames. And something interesting happened in that between that 11th and 12th ball. So I gave him a fist bump, and it wasn't because of the fist bump, but as I turned around, I just for a second I had a mental break, and I almost let myself off the hook. And this is one of those high performance things that I want to encourage anybody to kind of psychoanalyze themselves on.
I'm going to try and cue this up too while we get here. So, you're talking about the same thing that we're showing, but
so it's not in that one. It's actually in the one from Facebook.
Oh, okay.
When he gives me the well, you can see me come off of the lane.
Yeah.
You just can't see my son giving me the fist bump. So right there before the 12th ball. Yeah, so right before that, as I'm walking up to the approach, mentally I said, no matter what happens, this is going to be a great game.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that the camera didn't pick this up, because I started cussing myself. And the reason I did is I was like, why would you work so hard to get to this point and let yourself off the hook?
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, you prove to everybody, you prove to your son that this is possible. Yeah. And so I got my head back in it, and you can see me, I shake my hand and just kind of do my normal thing. And it was probably the 12th ball was probably the best ball that I threw all game. And that's really what operating under high pressure situations to me is all about. Yeah. Is can you be in the zone regardless of what else is going on? And more importantly, when you misstep, when you do let yourself out, can you get back? One of the other things in that video is the first ball of the 10th frame. I did one of the most arrogant things that I think I've ever done. And there was a 4-7-10 split on the left side, and I'm coming up in the 10th frame. And I slowed down for just a second, and then I literally waved myself off, and I was like, no, I'm shooting 300, and I'm not slowing down for anybody. And I threw that perfect shot, first one of the 10th frame, with a 4-7-10 on the opposite frame.
Wow.
A lot of people would have waved that off. They would have just, let me take it. Yeah. So we've got that. And just, again, I was hell bent that there was going to be a 300 that day. Yeah. And so it was actually the shot before that is when I came up for the, when it was still up there. So yeah, there we go. There. Yep. So there's a 4-7-10. You see, I don't even slow down. It's like, no, I'm ready.
And got the job done too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's just a piece of advice for anybody is, if you're ready, don't let anything slow you down. Like, stay in the moment, stay ready.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
all too often, and I get superstitions, people put extra weight on them. You could argue that, oh, well, Jim, you don't see it anyway, all those things. But, if it's your moment, you'll know it's your moment. Just stay in it.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of the reactions, Jay commented, to be honest, it does seem a little sacrilegious to me. I'm not a fan of people coming into my center and making a mockery of bowling. However, your story is different. I feel like that's kind of the important part here, right? You've got a different take on this than we do, but your heart is in the same place. You want to knock 10 pins down. You want to grow this sport. How do you grow the sport? That's kind of the $64,000 question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I go back to, you said you talked to Matt.
Yeah.
And, I believe that was Matt's first USBC Open.
Yep. He's
there for media relations, and he's like 3 days on the job, and my story comes across his desk. And he had a decision. He had a decision to make. Me going to nationals for that tournament was really by chance.
Yeah.
And so I had some friends that were going. One of their guys, I think it was a death in the family or something, and he couldn't go. And I had a dear friend who was knocking on death's door, and it was like, am I going to be able to go and get back? And will he pass while I'm gone? All those things.
Sure.
And so I decided to go. And I'm down there. I throw the first 2 frames of open play, and the lane monitor is headed down to tell me to stop. And he looks up, and I've got the first 2 strikes, and he backed off. And so I go on. I bowl that bowl team event. Fast forward, next day we come in, and we're sitting in the stands. We're watching, and this group of people come in, and they all look official. And one of the guys I'm with goes, "Haha, they're here for you," and he was joking. And they were there for me.
Wow.
And so I come out of the stands, and it was turns out it's Matt and Lucas and the whole crew, and they want to talk, and what is this? How did this start? They're still trying to decide, is this good? Is this bad? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he making fun of all of us as bowlers? All of those coming together. And we sat down and talked. And Matt told me years later, he goes, "Man, just as soon as I started talking to you, I knew that you were passionate about bowling, and that this wasn't a joke. This wasn't to make us look bad or any of those things." But he had to, he's on a tightrope. He's brand new on the job, and he's got this crazy thing that falls in his lap. And, fast forward, I consider him a great friend, and he's absolutely a wonderful influence in bowling. And, the next day we come out on the lanes, and I'm sure people have seen that video. It's got a couple million views, but it's where the lady's like, it's asinine. Some other guy saying, "Please, people aren't going to believe it. I got to show them on league." And of course, he's got the old school camcorder out and all those things. Cause we're talking about 2005 here.
Yep.
And, so I do this interview with ABC, and looking back on it, oh my gosh, like, not that I don't have a thick Southern accent now, but oh my goodness, I was a bit of a train wreck with my first interview there. And the guy from ABC said, "Jim, this is going to be everywhere in the next 48 hours. Okay. And, I head back home. Again, I did have a funeral to get to, and then the phone starts ringing, and I get a phone call from Jimmy Kimmel. And I think it's a joke. I'm thinking somebody's pulling a prank here. Ha ha, that's funny. And then the next morning, I got a phone call from Good Morning America and a phone call from the Today Show.
Jeez.
And I even asked the lady from Good Morning America, I said, "How did you get my phone number?" And she goes, "You don't really want to know."
Yep. We have our ways.
Okay. Whatever works.
Uh-huh.
And, I was thrown directly into this kind of weird situation of, the Good Morning America wanted an exclusive, Jimmy Kimmel wanted an exclusive, and the Today Show wanted an exclusive. And here I am, I'm back at work trying to do my day job.
Right.
And I've got all these shows kind of coming out of the woodwork wanting me to do things.
You need a team to manage all this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so I don't have a manager. I'm just trying to field phone calls and try to get a feel for what's right and what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that first round of those TV shows and things, the deciding factor was really who was nicer to me. And that was Good Morning America. The Today Show really, I know they had more viewership, but they really had a little bit of an attitude. Okay. And they wanted me to bowl outside. And so I'm thinking, okay, we've got lanes, we've got oil, we've got evaporation, we've got a lot of variables that we can't control. Good Morning America was going to be inside. And then they were willing to sweeten the deal. They said, "We don't really care who goes first. Jimmy Kimmel's on our same network. So we'll play that with them. We'll play nice with them. And oh, by the way, we'll fly whoever you want out in order to see the show."
Oh, wow.
And so my parents had not been on an airplane. They had some traumatic flights on the way back from Germany when my dad got out of the military. And so they decided they were never going to fly again. And so I used this as some leverage. I said, well, you've got flights to come with me to LA and New York. You can let them waste, or you can come see me bowl on television. And naturally, they ended up in LA with me. In fact, I had my whole family did. And my uncle Robert Bishop, who's not with us anymore, but he was arguably my biggest fan because he was a bowler. He really liked bowling. He bowled league for years. And from the first time he saw me bowl backwards, he just knew. He was like, this is something. Yeah. And, he and my aunt, they booked their own flights, flew out to LA. The crazy thing is, so he was in his 60s back then. And on Jimmy Kimmel, they had him introduce Fall Out Boy. And of course, he didn't even know what that was. He's like, what? And they just hand him a card and they're like, read this. Yeah. And so he introduced Fall Out Boy on Jimmy Kimmel. So, just the random craziness that all of this has afforded me. And, that's really the special thing for me is the people that I've met all over the world, whether it's in Japan or Hollywood or, where all the different cities that we've bowled in for USBC Open and those types of things. It's just been a whirlwind. It's been fantastic.
Yeah. I want to catch up on comments, but, Matt did, go through that. He said by the end of the first conversation, he said nothing registered for him except how much you love bowling and wanted to see it in the spotlight. And after that, anytime he had an opportunity to get you in front of a microphone or crowd to talk about bowling, it was a no-brainer. He called you reliable, well-spoken, and passionate. I mean, I can see that right here, on this show. Let me get back to this. So Max wants to know, how is your equipment drilled? And that's a good question because you mentioned the index finger. Mm-hmm. There's a hole for that. So 3 holes across the top and the thumb hole.
Absolutely.
What about like pitches? I mean, do you have to have it pitched different to get out of it? I do.
Yeah. So think of it like a left-handed drill, but for my right hand.
Okay.
And then the pitch for the thumb is a little bit tricky, just in that it's got to be so that I can get out of it.
Yeah.
And so we messed with that for years, and I couldn't even tell you what the measurement is on it. Roger Carroll over at Bowler's Mart or Dave at Creating the Difference. Those guys are masters and do a great job with my equipment. But it's a simple left-handed layout with I do use that index finger. And Brian Graham over at Brunswick, they've been so fantastic throughout almost 20 years hanging out with me. They started taking care of me back in 2005, and they were even Ebonite was willing to ship lanes to Good Morning America, and they didn't. I ended up bowling on hardwood floor and had to put oil out with a spray bottle. But they were willing to do whatever I needed, and that's just amazing that Hammer, Ebonite, Brunswick, through all the transition, they've never wavered or skipped a beat. And in fact, I joked with Brian Graham recently because, back in 2005, I was still trying to figure things out, still trying to figure out quite how the layout worked. And it was back when the Hog came out. And so Brian had drilled up a couple pieces of equipment for me that I was going to take to Jimmy Kimmel and Good Morning America. And it was about the third roll of this ball. And he just picked it up and he goes, "That's not right for you. I'll be back." And, he goes and drills another one up and comes out and it was spot on. He goes, that's the ball you throw.
Wow.
And, it's just that kind of support that has made this thing possible because, again, I didn't know how to bowl. I didn't know how to bowl backwards. There was no manual or there was nobody to emulate for equipment or how to release it or, that I would even need an index finger. The index finger was out of desperation because I couldn't stay behind the ball. And we drilled an index finger in, I forget what ball it was. And I think I threw it maybe 3 times and I came back in the pro shop and Roger Green was working the pro shop that day. And I said, punch them all. And he goes, Jim, you've thrown the ball 3 times. And I was like, it's a game changer. Put it in there. And so we punched up 3 or 4 more balls with an index finger. And, then that took some work to try to figure out, is it a gripped, hole? Is it not? Is it rounded? Just what was it that you needed in order to kind of give it what my approach and what my release needed.
Yeah. But you knew, and that's cool. That you knew, when
Right.
Jay says, good question, Max. And yeah, that's one that I didn't have down. So that was great. But he also mentioned you have an awesome attitude and such great insights. I needed to hear some of these things today. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, guys.
Max is a good dude. Like I said, episode 69 was his. So that's back on the channel too. And he says Kingpin 2. I'm guessing you've got both hands, so I don't know how that would work with like a hook and a rubber hand. But no, have you had any interest in Hollywood and movies or anything like that?
Well, truth be told, when I was on Jimmy Kimmel, that was the same night that Bam Margera and D.L. Hughley were on. Okay. And back then, Bam had a hugely successful show, and they wanted me to be on the season finale of Viva La Bam.
Oh.
But what they wanted me to do is they wanted me to hit Don Vito with a bowling ball. Oh. And of course, that did not make it past the smell test. The insurance company absolutely said no to that.
Right.
But they reached out, and it was a fun idea. And recently somebody asked me, if you could pick a team, who would you bowl with? Yeah. And this is really eclectic, but it would absolutely have to have Bill Murray on it. Okay. It would Morgan Freeman, Robert Downey Jr., Joe Rogan, and then on the next lane, about halfway through, I would love it if Peyton Manning was commentating and Kid Rock started bowling beside us, because you think about it, Kid Rock's got to be the biggest hype man you've ever seen in your entire life. So, I mean, he'd make you famous in 3 seconds, or at least you'd feel famous. Oh, yeah. But anyway, if I could just pick a team to, out of all the people in the world to bowl with and to experience it, that would be it.
And if you get Joe Rogan in there, you probably get Aaron Rodgers to come by. So then you've got a fan in me.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So,
yeah.
But no, it's one of those things that, again, bowling has just afforded me this path that you couldn't even dream up. Yeah. And, I was talking about when Matt called me years ago, and, this was 2007, I guess it was. Matt called and said, hey, I want you to be a part of a trick shot show. And I get out there, and, Bob Learn picks me up from the airport, and we drive straight to a bowling center. And he goes, you're bowling league tonight. And I said, do what? And, this is the first time I've met Bob. We're, and what I love about Bob is Bob did not cut me any slack. Okay. Like, he just literally picked me up from the airport, and he's like, I didn't even know what we were doing. He's like, we pull up in the center, and he goes, bring your stuff in. And the place is packed. And I'm like, I think they're bowling league tonight. And he goes, yeah, so are you. And so he'd made a phone call, and, now he's got me on this league as a sub. And I jump in, and I think I shot, 172 something, and, maybe another 2, so I held my own. But he goes, you're going to help us get people out for this event this week. And the thing about it was, back then I didn't have trick shots. And Bob goes, well, what other trick shots do you do? And I said, Bob, I don't do trick shots. Because at this point I was still trying to be taken seriously.
Me neither. You're not the only one.
Well, and Bob didn't hold back. He goes, Jim, every bowler on tour that's worth their salt has trick shots. And so, I went home, and I'm like, I got to have trick shots. So, the next year I came out, and I had a towel shot, and I had a, through the chair shot. And then the pinnacle for me, maybe even still to this day, with the exception of the 300 game, is in 2009, we do the trick shot show in Vegas. And it happened to be in between the semifinals and the finals for the, or after the, after they had gotten their last, the 4 that were going to be on the step ladder, during the Masters. And so everybody in bowling who earns their living in bowling is there and they're watching me.
Yeah.
And, just very surreal. And, had one of those moments where, in fact, I'll tell on myself. So the reason I stuttered just a little bit when I said it earlier that I'd never missed a shot is I got some real help from the bowling gods for this one shot. So, the event started out kind of rocky because they didn't let us practice beforehand. And then when they put the pattern out, they accidentally put the tournament pattern out instead of the house pattern. So the first 3 trick shots that were tried, and you got a crowd. There's a big crowd up in the stands.
Yeah.
The first 3 trick shots get missed.
Oh, jeez.
And so the crowd is, people don't come to trick shot shows to see trick shots tried.
Right.
They come to be amazed.
Yeah. So they're looking.
And so, yeah. And so here I am I'm up next. And Tom Clark, who we talked about earlier, Tom, I'm a big fan of Tom.
Yeah. And
Tom comes over and he goes, "No pressure or anything, Jim, but we need you to save this." And of course, I'm the guy that shouldn't be here. What are you talking about? And so, I hit the first trick shot, second trick shot. I think I made 7 or 8 in a row. Oh. And one of them was a 3-person shot. So it was Brian Voss, Bob Learn, and myself, and we were going to make the 5, 7, 10. And so we all throw the ball at the exact same time, which, 1 backwards bowler, 2 forward bowlers, and everybody's on the same lane. One's throwing left-handed, one's throwing right-handed. So the balls were supposed to cross. Mine was going to go between them, and we all pick up our pin.
Oh, jeez. That's
so,
all, huh?
Yeah, really easy. Well, I whiffed the 5 pin.
Uh-oh.
Right there live, I go right past it. But the balls hit, because they had turned the rack off so that it wouldn't come down. It wouldn't put the gate down. Yeah. The balls hit each other in the back, and 2 balls bounce back out on the lane where they'd hit each other, and they knock over the 5 pin, and the crowd thinks it's the most amazing trick shot they've ever seen.
Love it.
And so Tom comes over and he goes, "That's fantastic, Jim." He's like, "What are y'all going to do as a last shot?" And
what are you doing next?
Yeah, and I said, I've done all my trick shots. I don't have any more. Mm-hmm. And Bob goes, "I've got it." And of course, I'm thinking he's got some trick shot that he's going to do.
Right.
He goes up and he sets 2 chairs in the lane about 20 feet apart. So I got one at like 20 feet, one at 40 feet. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "All right, you're going to throw up between my feet and Dale Ballard's feet. And it's going to be you throwing backwards between 2 Hall of Famers' feet and making a strike."
Oh, my God.
And this is all happening live.
And don't miss, because we've got the next tour stop next week, right?
Absolutely. And so, Carmen's on the mic, and Carmen absolutely deserves to be on the mic. He is a wonderful showman and keeps the crowd's attention.
Carmen Salvini.
While we're down here doing, the craziness. And so I did the only thing I could think of, because I had never tried this shot before. So I go over and I ask Carmen for the mic, and Carmen looks at, of course he's way taller than I am, but he looks at me like, "What is wrong with you?" And I was like, no. And so I look at the crowd and I'm like, "All right, so here's the deal. I've never tried this trick shot, and I'm the only person that would have ever tried it. I'm about to throw a ball between 2 Hall of Famers' legs and then try to make a strike. Mm-hmm. So here's the deal. I'm willing to do this under one condition. If I miss it, or if I hit either one of these guys, I want you to boo me out of this place. But if I hit it, I want you to raise so much cane, jump up and down, yell and scream like it was the best shot you've ever seen."
Yeah.
Give Carmen the mic back, walk over, go right between both their feet. Don't hit either one of them. Perfect pocket strike, and they go nuts. And I was on cloud 9.
Yeah.
And
holy cow.
With the exception of the 300 game, I don't know that I've had a better moment on the lanes, period. It was just magical.
All of that. Yeah. In one sitting, I can imagine. Oh my goodness. Jay wants to know if you've ever established an average throwing while facing the pins.
I have not. So I've never bowled in league forward at all. And then the last game that I bowled forward was July 25th of 2005. And the reason for that is when I was getting ready to go on live with Jimmy Kimmel, they wanted to randomly select me out of the audience. And there was no way to do that if I was bowling backwards. So they hired some actors to hang out and be my friends, and I had to bowl forward, and I shot 112. They randomly selected me, and I shot 210 live on television.
There you go.
And, of course, it was to hide everything from his aunt. His aunt was a bowler, Aunt Chippy. And, we've kept up with each other over the years, and she's been great. But she was floored because I turned around and I said, I'm going to have to keep my eye on you. And it was all she could do to hold back the cuss words. She knew she had been had.
Funny stuff. I've gone kind of, and interviews have a way of doing this. You kind of, deviate from the script a little bit, and that's usually a good thing. So we're doing really good here. I don't want to take up your whole evening, but I do want to get to this point because, I noticed that on the Facebook post following the 300, one of the people you tagged was Deandra Asbeatty, who's also been on this show before.
Yeah.
So of course I had to reach out and ask her about you. She says she remembers doing a story on you when Jason, I'm assuming Belmonte, and I had the International Art of Bowling. She says your new form was definitely a new type of bowling art. She says she wasn't surprised to see that you bowled the 300 backwards. She said you weren't just bowling that way to be funny, that you could tell that you've always been committed to bowling your way, and that you're just proof that there's a lot of ways to express yourself on the lanes.
Well, I didn't know you were going to talk about her, but so this is from one of those trick shot shows.
Oh, there it is.
So you see Deandra on there.
Full screen there.
There's Carolyn Dorn-Ballard, my
wow.
name, Bob Learn, Wendy McPherson, and that's just it's one of those things. I've been afforded this opportunity to bowl with so many amazing people that push this sport forward and engage new bowlers all the time. And she and I are friends on Facebook. Every once in a while, we run into each other. We were both on the set of Split, 10 years ago. Along with Pete Weber, and just the bowling community is fantastic. And so, when people get negative or they lash out at me or anything like that, I really have pity for them because they can't see the excitement in our sport. And it's changing. It's always changing. It's not in its heyday, but we're back on television, and there's some really good stuff going on. That's my son Castle, and so he was there for my 300 game, and that 300 wasn't even supposed to happen. It was just it was a crazy day, but that there's a lot of growth in bowling. It's just you have to be willing to see that it's not in their traditional way. And it takes effort. It takes positivity. It takes, you taking somebody bowling to introduce somebody else to bowling. It doesn't just happen naturally. And so I think every one of us, if we care about this sport, we have to be an advocate for the sport. Mm-hmm. And that takes us being open to other ideas. I like the two-handers out there on and there's people that bash them nonstop. Yeah. But my son is literally about to start his first coaching in bowling, and I asked him. I said, "Do you want to bowl two-handed or one-handed?" And he said he wanted to bowl two-handed. Okay, great. And so I'm excited for him to bowl two-handed. Yeah. Whatever gets him on the lanes, whatever excites him, because that's the thing. Like all too often, people are quick to squelch that excitement. I mean, back up to I forget the coach's name. He was just inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Fred Borden,
I believe so. So yes. So when Belmonte was 10, 12 years old, something like that, he was in Australia. Belmonte was in a tournament, and his coach asked him to have a conversation with Belmonte and tell him to stop messing with this two-handed thing. And after watching Belmonte, and he won the tournament. I don't know if it was the youth portion or if it was the full deal, but he won it as a 12, 13-year-old kid. And he came up to his coach after and he said, I'm not going to tell him to stop.
Right.
And thank goodness.
No kidding.
Thank goodness. Now, with what I do, I'm not under any false pretenses that what I do causes it to be harder. It doesn't make it easier. Now, some people will say, oh, well, you're on the left-hand side. Well, my response to people that want to complain about that is, how bad did you want to be on the left-hand side? Not as bad as me.
Right.
Now that wasn't why I started doing it, but I mean, it shuts them down just like that.
Yeah.
And, whether you're on the right side, whether you're on the left side, we all have our game. And if you're in there playing your game the right way with as well as you can possibly play it, then you're doing the right thing. If you're complaining about other folks, if you're complaining about this or that or whatever, hey, everybody that's bowling that league, everybody that's bowling that squad, they're dealing with the same things that you are. Yeah. So it's a level playing field. Okay? So suck it up and be real about it. All right? Some days are going to be easier than others. Some shots are going to be easier than others. Things are going to happen. It's going to be tough. But as I love it when Coach Michael Burt says this, it's going to be tough, but we're going to find a way to win.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if that's your mentality, go after it. And stop squawking. I mean, it happened my son's basketball game this last week. It was clear because they were winning 16-8. And it was like you flipped a switch, the officials decided to even it out. And every call was going their way.
Yeah.
And I told the kids, it's going to be tough, but we're going to find a way to win.
Yeah.
Like, keep positive, keep making good shots, keep playing your game. And we won.
Yeah.
And that's just how you have to attack life. Because there's always going to be times it's not fair, if it doesn't feel fair, or nobody said it was going to be fair. Right. Suck it up, get out there, go do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully your positivity helps somebody else, pick themselves up. I got the best compliment I've ever gotten in my entire life, maybe. Luke and Waz over at the Bowlers Show.
Oh yeah.
So I was on with them a couple of episodes ago, and then they invited everybody back that had been on for their final show.
Yeah.
And I was not prepared for this, and I did tear up when Luke's telling me this. But his wife commented in the comments and said something about my positive attitude and that it changed their life. And they could have just kept going, but Luke stopped and he said, Jim, you don't understand. It changed our life.
Wow.
He said, I had kind of gotten into this cycle where I was a little bit down on myself and a little bit down about bowling and those types of things. And how positive you were about, your interactions, and when somebody was mad, or when somebody said you were a mockery to the sport, or when somebody kicked you out, or all of these things. He goes, the fact that you didn't let that stop you and you just kept going, he goes, it changed how my wife and I interact with each other. And I mean, it's like right now, you don't know how you're affecting somebody. And so it's real easy to affect somebody in a negative way, but it's just as easy to affect somebody in a positive way. All right. So just, if you can figure out a way to stay positive throughout all the things that come at you, you're going to be better off for it. And I know it sounds like a soapbox, but man, it's true. And that's how all this has happened. I've been so fortunate that my positive attitude has carried through when opinions wanted to go the other way.
Yeah.
And, so this could have easily been over in 2003. But here we are 20 years later. And, I'm on Bowling with the FEF. I'm on your podcast, man.
Thank goodness for that.
Well, and, you asked me when we were talking about this originally, Tom Clark reached out and said, hey, Andrew reached out and wants you to be on his podcast.
Which is unbelievable to me, by the way. So that's not like, Well,
I mean, you don't tell Tom Clark no. I mean, Tom Clark calls and says, hey, they want you to be on.
Ugh.
You say yes and figure out what it is later.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad about that. And, now is a good time that, talking about Tom Clark, when, I should let people know you've got a YouTube channel. It's got 1,100 subscribers. I need a few of those too. So, let's
Absolutely.
give it a little subscription here. It doesn't cost you anything. You can, you can be the first to know when we have new videos and stuff up. Yeah, that 1,100 subscribers is a big number, and I know if you're Mr. Beast you get that in a weekend, but neither
Right.
of us are Mr. Beast. So talk about that YouTube channel and how it's kind of grown and evolved while you've been doing what you're doing.
Well, if we back up, I started the channel I think 14 years ago, so it's a lot. It's been around a long time.
Yeah.
But some of the videos are old enough that they're not great quality, and I was not that technical back then. Still not today. I've been afforded the luxury of having IT people in my career for years and years and years, so they've helped me get through. And in fact, I had an issue yesterday. I reached out to both of them and said, "Hey, I can't get my background to work," and so luckily that they were able to help me out. But I think all but maybe 300 of those subscribers are in the last 90 days.
Oh,
So
wow.
I had 286 subscribers prior to the 300 game. And then, I've added, I think I'm around 1,110, something like that.
Mhm.
And, most of the views have come since then. I was monetized years ago and I got one check for $100. And then they changed the rules for monetization and I was no longer monetized.
Oh,
And I
jeez.
thought, there's 4,000 hours watched is just a lot,
Yeah.
and just wouldn't have believed that I would hit that. And then all of a sudden with this 300 game, I was getting 20,000 views a day,
Jeez.
and it just shot way up. Now it's cooled off, and my content is a little bit different in that I do post bowling stuff. I also post business things because, like I say, I grew a company in Nashville from $6 million to a little over $100 million before it sold,
Mhm.
and from 32 team members up to almost 500. And coaching is my passion. I did all of that through coaching every single team member every month
Mhm.
to believe in themselves, and so it kind of ties back to the positive outlook and kind of changing how people see themselves. But I've never really saw myself as a YouTube, kind of ed person, but all of a sudden it kind of fell in my lap, and so I had to reach out and get some assistance with the channel and say, okay, well, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? If you're monetized, you can have infractions and get kicked off and
Mhm.
lose your monetization, all that stuff. And so I said, all right, I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And so, doing the podcasts um, and that type of stuff. And thank you for giving a shout out to the channel. Those types of things.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
that's helped grow the channel as well. And huge shout out to Darren Tang out there. I mean, dude is crushing it. I mean, he's over 100,000 viewers. I think he's or 100,000 subscribers. I think he's around 120 now,
Yeah.
and just an amazing speed and with quality content too.
Oh, yeah.
And then 220 average bowler. He's got some great content too. And that was a surreal moment. I don't know if you saw his or not, but he did a shout out to me shooting the 300
Oh, wow.
and said, why does this video not have millions of views? Because it's the craziest thing to happen in bowling in a decade.
Yeah.
And he actually tried. He did a video where he bowled a whole game backwards, and he did better than I did my first time. So my first
Oh,
game
wow.
was a 48, and his first game was a 62. So
Okay.
he held his own.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, Max mentioned that you truly are an inspiration. Jim Cripps. He gave your name the government treatment.
Well, Max, thank you so much, and really, anybody can do it. We all get to choose. We get to choose every morning that we wake up. We get to choose how we're going to do that day. One of the things that I focus on with my son is making sure that the first thing that he hears from me in the morning and the last thing that he hears from me at night is positive.
Yeah.
And that's tough some days. We all have tough days. There are days we don't want to go to the gym. There are days that we don't want to eat right. There are days that we don't want to go to work. There's days we don't want to be positive. But I don't think there's ever been a day that I made the decision to be positive that when I got ready to lay my head down at night, that I wasn't thankful for that. And again, it's not always easy, but we have a choice. And, especially, I don't get to hide in a bowling alley. That's one of the things that I think a lot of bowlers take for granted, and I had to get used to. So if you go in and you want to practice shooting at corner pins, well, then you can practice shooting at corner pins. But if I'm practicing shooting at corner pins, somebody's going to say, well, that guy's got a 28 in the 9th frame because he's bowling backwards and you shouldn't do that. Yeah. And so I'm on stage every time I bowl. And that's really kind of how I try to live my life is there's always somebody watching, even if it's just me. And so if I can keep a hold of my emotions, if I can stay positive, well, then I'm going to be better for it. Everybody around me is going to be better for it because there's all kinds of negativity. You watch the news, and I will say, and Andrew, we talked about this the other day. I haven't watched the news but 3 times in the last decade.
Nobody's perfect.
It's because I don't know how you would stay positive if you did. And I'm not playing favorites. It doesn't matter where you get your news from. Yeah. They talk about the negative, and it's up to us to create our positive. Yeah. And so, whether on the lanes, off the lanes, I just look at life as I'm on stage, somebody's watching, and what are they picking up from what I do? And it's never failed me. Now, that's not to say that every interaction is perfect, but I can't ever put a finger on a time that, me choosing to take the high road or choosing to stay positive was the wrong decision.
Yeah. Wow. Well said. Well said. At the end of every episode, I go off the sheet, and I talked to you about this beforehand. We have you challenge somebody else. It doesn't have to be the greatest bowler in the world, but certainly can be. But we look for people who are passionate about the sport and have a unique story to tell, which we all do. So, Jim Cripps, who would you like to challenge to be on a future episode of Bowling with the FEF?
So this is not going to shock anybody. He's my favorite bowler. I love bowling with him. We have a great time on the lanes. Mr. 300 himself, Mr. Bob Learn.
Yeah.
So Bob, if you're watching, hit Andrew up, and if not, I'll connect you guys.
Awesome. And that's a great one because I don't know him personally, never talked to him before, but always, was impressed by what he did on tour. But also Parker Bone has been a guest on this show before, and he talked about the mulligan. And if you know Bob's story, about the mulligan. So it's going to be cool, to get his side of that, assuming that comes to fruition. So, Bob, if you're looking for a way to get a hold of me, bowlingwiththefef@yahoo.com is my email, and it would be a pleasure to have you on for sure. So,
Andrew, I'm going to throw out there a plug for Bob too. Bob is doing a bronze level coaching certification. I think it's the first week of March. Okay. And they're here in Columbia, Tennessee. I believe it's at Galaxy Lanes, but that is a great way to further bowling.
Oh yeah.
Is for us to have more coaches out there in the world, continuing to, help people get better, to stay interested in the sport, to help youth bowlers get better, all those things. So if you've ever considered getting certified to be a coach, bronze level coaching is the first level. I think there's an online course you got to take before that to pass, but it's real quick and easy. And then bronze level is the first one that's actually on the lanes. And so I'd love to see some more coaches out there, and some people sign up for that because we need more coaches in the world.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Doesn't matter if you're from Tennessee or Wisconsin or anywhere in between.
Absolutely.
I would echo that sentiment as well. Jay says that would be great if he comes on. Totally agree. Like I said, never met him before, but always wanted to. So hopefully we can make that happen. So the next time, you'll see us live on the channel is at the Peacocks Classic. That's coming up this Friday through Sunday. And pray for me, because we've got some nasty weather coming through, and I have a feeling I'm going to have to drive through a little of this,
Oh yeah.
to get to Waterloo. So tomorrow might be a little tricky, but that'll be the next time that we're on. And then coming up, our next show, interview based like this, is with a lady named Megan Antonelli, coming up Tuesday, January 30th, 6 p.m. Central, right here on the channel. Megan is actually one who reached out to me after a different interview. Not that she was challenged off the sheet. She was just interested in the show, which is awesome. I love that. If you're interested in the show, feel free to reach out. This is for you, even if you don't believe it. She's the daughter of a head mechanic father and a league coordinator mother. She's been doing some special things on the lanes in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, and we will have her story 6:30 p.m. Central, Tuesday, January 31st, is when that will hit live on the channel. Jim, it has been a pleasure getting to know you and your story. You're certainly inspiring people everywhere you go, including, right here on our show, and really happy that we connected and we were able to have you on.
Absolutely. Andrew, keep doing what you do. I appreciate it. Thank you for putting out great content, having all types of bowlers on. I think it's great for the sport, and the fact that you're so dedicated to getting good quality content out, everybody can see that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No, that means a lot coming from you. And thank you to all of you who tune in. I never take it for granted. Have a great couple days here. Hopefully we see you on Friday. Till then, be just and fear not. And hope to see you next time.